My friend, Rabbi George Gittleman, is celebrating his 25th year as the spiritual leader of Congregation Shomrei Torah in Santa Rosa. He holds a master's in Hebrew Letters and Ordination from Hebrew Union College and is a Senior Rabbinic Fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. Rabbi George is a serious meditator and is a graduate of the Rabbinic Leadership Program and the Jewish Mindfulness Teacher Certificate Program of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. He is a lifelong fly fisherman, backpacker, beachcomber, and boogie boarder. I can personally attest about his skill as a birder and a tracker. George and I take walks together in nature. He always brings his binoculars and tells me what he's seeing. He knows all their names. And while he hasn't actually let me look through the binoculars, I do believe him. Also, tracking, wonderful tracker. Once we lost each other in the woods and he found me. It was great. I just stood still and texted him and told him where I was, and he found me. So, not just in matters of nature is Rabbi George my teacher. He has a big heart and a great intellect and inspires me all the time. So please welcome Rabbi George Gittleman.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi Irwin. That's so sweet. Just a word, I'm actually doing this with Jay Peretz, a member of Congregation Shomrei Torah, and my birding partner for 15 years. He has many other talents, but those are the two that he's bringing. Also photographer. I have the binoculars. He has the camera, and we kind of work as a pair. And for the birding part, we're going to look at his pictures. So, wow. One thing I do need to tell you, my mother-in-law, Pam Collins, died last Sunday on Mother's Day, and her memorial was a few hours ago, earlier today. And so I'm a little mevubal, kind of upside down, but I'm still really happy to be here and share this with you. In fact, this is the first time I've tried to share this spiritual practice and love of my life, animal tracking and birding in a Jewish setting. So I just didn't want to not do it. And it's also great to be with all of you here this evening and to celebrate Revelation, this way. So here we go. I want to begin with a story. A little over 15 years ago, my father-in-law, Dennis Collins, died unexpectedly. And he was a lifelong birder. And I always found it interesting, but I never really paid attention. But something happened when he died, as if he laid his hands on me, and there was a sort of birding smicha, like a way of transmitting the birding mantle and knowledge from him to me. I'm actually not even exaggerating, because almost the day after he died, my interest in birding peaked, and I got binoculars, a bird book, and started to look at birds for the first time in my life with any seriousness. And at about the same time, I started to go looking at animal sign, their tracks, their scat, their poo, and other things like their feed sign, with Jim Sullivan, who's my tracking mentor, and Reuben Weinswig, a member of Shomrei Torah, and also a great friend. We were friends. Jim's a plein air painter, and I knew him as a painter and a philosopher. And then he said, I do this thing called animal tracking. And about the same time, I started to go animal tracking with Jim and Reuben. And we would go to the sand dunes near Salmon Creek. And we'd go there, and I think we're going to the beach, but we would spend hours in these dunes looking at animal sign. And after a couple hours, I was really bored and frustrated, because I'm like, we're at the beach, let's go to the beach. So Jim kind of suffered through that. Also, I brought my phone along because I'm a rabbi and I'm on call, and I was kind of, anxious and checking my phone. And I don't know. He had a lot of patience, I guess, because he never really gave me a hard time. He suffered along with me. And one day I dragged them to the beach, because come on, guys, like it's just around that hill. Let's just go to the water. Let's hang out for a little while. So we did that. And we're looking around, and Jim is pointing out some shorebirds. And one shorebird is pecking a hole into the sand, looking for, I'm going to guess, an insect or sand crab. And the bird does that. He walks away, and Jim says, let's go look at the tracks. And so I say, okay. And I'm happy because we're at the beach and I'm hanging out where I want to be. And I go, okay, let's go look at this bird. And I look into the hole, little hole a bird pecked into the sand, and I fall in the hole. Of course, I can't fall in the hole physically, but I had a mystical experience where I lost my separate sense of self, and I actually did fall in the hole. And the distinction between me and the hole and the bird, the separation between me and the divine collapsed. And for a moment, I was gone. It was just me and Yud Hey Vav Hey, or just Yud Hey Vav Hey. And then, boom, I came out of the hole, as it were, with my eyes wide open, full of wonder. And that's when my true tracking and birding began, because that's when I realized that this was a profound spiritual practice. So that's my introduction to like how I got into birding. Over time, once I realized what this could be, tracking and birding, looking at birds, evolved from a nice way to spend time outside with friends, which is still is, to a serious spiritual practice. But it took a little time. You have this moment at Sinai, and then I still struggled to stay focused and pay attention, to learn to leave my phone behind, to learn to actually be present and to be open to what was all around me. But over time that happened. I'm not saying every time I go is like that, but over time the practice deepened. And at the same time, I learned more about what really meant to be an animal tracker. And I want to say a word about what is animal tracking. It's an ancient practice. Really, animal tracking is older than Judaism. Hunter-gatherers were animal trackers. And one can guess and assume that actually much of their culture, religion, way of life developed from animal tracking. So it's an ancient practice used by hunters to this day, but also by naturalists, amateur and professional. And the practice really is to learn everything you can about all life around you. Animals, yes, birds, insects, flora, fauna, everything. And in doing that, you learn really to be curious and ask questions. And also you become much more aware of your environment. You have maybe no idea how little you understand about what's happening in your backyard, even in your house. And then it's exponential as you move out into the world. So tracking is a practice where you become curious and aware of all the life around you, from the annoying insects in your house, to the skunk that's digging in your backyard, to the raccoon that ruined your garden, to the raven that's eating the bird seed out of your bird feeder. And you learn to make a place, if not always love, all these creatures. In fact, I used to complain about the squirrel in my backyard, and my tracking mentor, I'd say, that darn dumb squirrel, I hate that squirrel. And Jim would say, you shouldn't say that. That's disrespectful to the squirrel. The squirrel is just doing what the squirrel does. And so in this way, life becomes much bigger and grander, and your eyes, already made for wonder, begin to see the wonder around you in a way that you haven't been able to see up until now. So that's a little bit about animal tracking. Birding is similar to tracking, but focused on birds, for the most part without the hunting element. For sure, hunters pay close attention to birds, when they come and go, where they fly, their flight path, what they eat, and so forth. But birding generally isn't about hunting birds, but appreciating, counting, understanding, praying through seeing them. I would say both birding and tracking are prayer practices. I'll just explain how birding could be a prayer practice. So if you even without binoculars, are beautiful. But if you get a decent pair of binoculars, Erwin, I'll share next time. I have nice binoculars I can show you. If you even what some birders call LBJs, little brown jobbies, even the little brown, quote, dull birds, if you look closely at them, are wondrous. The color, the feathers, the intricate way they're built, and also the way they move, how they speak, their songs, their calls. Everything about them, when you pay close attention to them, is wondrous. So in that sense, when I go birding, I pray. I say, thank you, God, for this wondrous life I'm a part of. Thank you, God, for this beautiful bird. It's a praise practice. It's a practice of thanksgiving. And it's also a mindfulness practice. You're paying close attention, to what you see, to what you hear, sometimes also what you smell. All the senses can be involved. So I want to take a moment to connect it to Jewish tradition a little bit more. And then I want to leave time to look at pictures. How much time do we actually have?
You have until 10 of the hour. So you've got another 40 minutes.
Okay, beautiful. So I think there are many ways you could connect animal tracking and birding to Jewish tradition. And if we had time, we would dig deep. But I just want to give you a touchstone, one way. So this is a familiar text. Hear, O Israel, Yud-Heh Vav-Heh is our God. Sorry, Yud-Heh Vav-Heh is one. I got the Lord out, but I forgot the there, okay? Yud-Heh Vav-Heh is the name of God we don't know how to pronounce, which I like to call the ground of all being. Paul Tillich, famous Protestant theologian, said that. Okay, God is one, and then you shall love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home, when you are away, when you lie down, and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. It's the Shema. Many of you know the Shema. And the two things I want to focus on for a moment are the idea that God is one, and also the commandment to love God with all your being, heart, soul, might, all your being. So the idea of God's oneness and the commandment to love God with all your being. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And again, if we had time, we could break out into groups and just talk about it, but I want to move us along and make some suggestions about this. What does it mean that God, the ground of all being, is one? What are the implications for that? Like, what does it mean to you, just for a second? It's rhetorical, but I want you to think to yourself and answer the question to yourself. That we're all interconnected. That is, Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Vietnamese Buddhist, would say, we inter-are. He says you can see a cloud and a piece of paper because that paper holds all life. The cloud that brought the rain, that germinated the seed, that grew the plant, the person born to drive the machine, that cut the tree, that made the paper, everything is in a piece of paper. So that's certainly one implication of God being one, that we're all one, we're all interconnected. And if that's true, then you can ask the next question, well, what does it mean to love God in every way? And what I would say is it means to love and know all creation, not just your neighbor, but the skunk in your backyard, or the ants coming in from the cold to raid your food cabinet, or the birds, on the wire, pooing on your car right now, or during the day. I mean, if God is one, and that means we're all part of this oneness, this ground of all being, and we're commanded to love that oneness, then surely you should know it. Surely you should be aware of it, and be in some ways mindful and connected to it. So to me, tracking and birding is a way to answer the question, what are the implications of God's oneness and also the commandment to love God? Of course, we can read this text many other ways, but I offer you that one possibility. There are many other ways you could connect tracking to Judaism. Sidebar, if you want to read a book that talks about Judaism in a way that's more nature friendly, read The Magic of the Ordinary by Rabbi Gershom Winkler, The Magic of the Ordinary. What he argues is that we're an indigenous people. There you go. Thank you, Rev. Irwin. Like, it's not an easy read, but he connects us to our ancient roots. So for example, Abraham, why is he always sitting under these oak trees? Because we used to have sacred trees. And it's not a far-fetched to know that our ancient ancestors were animal trackers, and their reverence for nature flowed from that. And loving God to them meant loving the natural world for sure. A few other ways just to think about tracking and birding and Torah. They're both interpretive traditions, for one. So when you look at Torah, like you look at a text and you ask yourself, well, what do the words mean? What is the sentence? What is the context? What's happening here? Sometimes it can seem obvious, sometimes it can't. Then you have like great rabbis like Rabbi Akiva who will ask, well, how are the letter shapes? Are there crowns on the letters? What do the crowns teach us? Same with animal tracking. Like, what happened here? I see this track. What kind of track is it? And where was it going? What was happening in its life? What did it eat? Was it running? Was it trotting? Was it walking? Was it afraid? So they're both interpretive traditions. They're also traditions where you ask questions, and we actually in tracking have what's called the sacred question box for questions we have no answers for. It's like in the Talmud, when you can't solve a question, Elijah will come and answer it for us sometime in the Messianic future. So it's also a tradition of questioning. In Torah and in tracking and birding, you pay close attention. God is, in that sense, in the details. And both are ways of knowing God through getting to know the animals and life around you, through getting to know the texts that teach us about at least the way our ancestors knew God and give us a jumping off place to know God ourselves. So that's a word like about what tracking is and how it connects to Jewish tradition, at least by me. Now, we want to share some pictures because short of taking you, we got to show you. So I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, and I'm going to pray that this works. I'm going to thank Jay in advance for helping me get this together on Flickr. We had a little stressful moment, kind of getting this together. Okay, so that is a hole that a bird made looking for, I'm going to guess, a sand crab. And that's the kind of hole that I fell into when I first realized that tracking was a spiritual practice. That is a picture. It's a little delayed. Can you see the next picture? Jim Sullivan, has he showed up yet?
Yes, yes, we're right with you.
So Jim Sullivan is my tracking mentor, my tracking rabbi, and he's still teaching tracking. He's also a plein-air painter. He's about to turn 85, and he can kick my butt out there. I can't keep up with him. That's me and Jim looking in the sand. We do a lot of our tracking at the beach because the sand is a good substrate. And he's asking me questions, and I'm trying to figure out what the answer is. Half the time I'm where I have no idea. That's another, it's kind of like Torah in that way. Often you're just perplexed. This is his tracking circle. So he teaches classes, and like you gather around to study Torah, this group is gathered around to study these tracks and figure out what's happening here. Okay, that beautiful face is a river otter you can see at Salmon Creek Beach and Abbott's Beach. And actually, I think you can see river otters at Spring Lake sometimes. Jay, I think, yeah. So beautiful animal just in itself. And check out his tracks. So now that you know, I want to just go back. Now that you know that this animal lives around you, imagine the excitement if you saw that in the sand. you would go, wow, ma gadlu masach Adonai, how wondrous are your works, God. And you learn it has five toes, not four. And it looks kind of like a raccoon track, but it's a little different. And its gait, you can picture its gait. It has, in that case, it's a 2x2 gait. It kind of goes like that, but it also bounds. Here's a bounding track of the same critter, bounding. And what's even cooler is it has its own slide. That is a river otter slide. Now you can picture it. So let's say you don't ever get to see the otter, but now you know otter sign, and you run into that slide, and it's the right dimension, and you know it's not a kid or an animal, and you go, wow, an otter was having fun and slid down into the water there. Kind of cool. All right, moving on. Anyone want to guess what that track is? You can unmute yourself if you're able to and give it a guess. I'll tell you. Say that again.
A bear.
Well, a bear would have a different shape. It's hard to know the size, but it would have an extra claw for one. One more guess. Some of you.
Coyote.
Coyote. Actually, canine would have been, because the size is hard to know, a canine would have been a good guess. It's a coyote. It's a coyote track. And we have coyotes all over the place. Dog tracks tend to be more splayed. And you see the two front claws here. They're more prominent in dogs, and the back ones come up farther usually. So that's coyote. And we have coyote all around. And if you go to the beach or even anywhere where there's mud, you'll see lots of dogs. Dogs are like kind of Godzilla. And then you'll see coyotes and also foxes. So these are skunk tracks. So the size is hard to see, but see that footprint? See how 4 tracks fit with one footprint? That is a skunk, and it's called a 4x4, slant 4. It lopes that way. It kind of trots that way, not like other animals. And again, once you begin to recognize who these critters are, you begin to ask the question, like, who came first, the skunk or the human? And you'll notice also here, these dimples in the sand, that's a mouse track. It's a bounding mouse, and probably much earlier than the skunk. You begin to realize that, like the sand that you go to, the beach that you go to, and then you'll see here's another bounding mouse track here. It's full of life that you never see. And when you go to the beach to go lay in the sand, you have no idea that you're walking over a whole nother story, a Torah of its own kind. Okay, so this is another example, and it'd be hard to know without knowing the tracks are, but that's a bounding rabbit. And actually, its back feet come in front of its front feet. These are its front feet. Because if you can picture the way a rabbit moves and know it has these big back feet, you know it's going this way. And then what you can't see maybe, but if I make it a little bigger, see all those little dots? Those are mouse tracks. There's a bounding mouse track right here. Mouse will walk all around here. And this looks to me like a bird, a hopping bird. Hop, hop, hop. See that? So the curious mind stops at a place like this and says, well, what's happening here? Well, okay, we're rabbit. And then you can see what the rabbit's eating. It's too hard to see here, but we can tell that it's munched on stuff here. You can see rabbit sign, and also that the mice have been eating here. There's mice here. And then what kind of bird was it? What was it doing here? There's a whole story that you can tell here. But mostly you just don't know it exists at all. You kind of just move on because that's the way we are. We're mostly unaware of our natural environment. But once you begin to learn the signs, your eyes made for wonder start to work for you. I want to give Jay plenty of time. So we go to 9:50, is that correct? Okay. And Jay, you mean 20 minutes, you think? I can't hear you. So this is a bounding mouse dragging. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jay.
Just 15 minutes is good.
Okay. This is a bounding mouse dragging something to cache it, to put it, to save it. And it's very small. I mean, you have to pay close attention to see what's happening there. And this also is a bounding mouse, very, very small. So you have to just picture this mouse in the sand moving like this. And then even cooler, okay, so an intersection of a fox and a mouse. Apparently they came at different times because there would have been, the fox would have tried to eat the mouse. So if you have, those of you who have kind of fields near you, you can find these in most fields. This is a vole trail, little mouse-like critter that they're very uptight and they work in straight lines. And if we look closely, we can see that they make little bite-sized pieces of grass and they cast them into little piles. They also have latrines, vole latrines, where they go to the bathroom. This is also a vole trail, but it could be a mice trail. It's a little hard to tell, but next time you go like to Duran Beach or to Salmon Creek, walk around a little bit. You'll see these mice trails all over the place. And if you look closely, you can see their actual paw prints, little mice prints in the sand itself. Okay, so there are two tracks here. This is a right front, and this is a left rear. Anyone want to try to guess what this animal is? This is in the mud near Salmon Creek.
Raccoon.
A raccoon. How'd you guess that?
I've seen that before.
Yeah, so they look a bit like otters, but this is a raccoon track, and they are bold animals. You'll see raccoon tracks on the beach, and you can just tell by the way they walk that they're not scared of anybody because they walk in a straight line. They walk, in the middle of the beach, and guess where they're always going? They're always going where humans are. They love trash cans. They love picnic tables. They just go where the food is. So those are raccoon tracks. That is some coyote poo. I know because coyotes have a long intestine, and basically by the time they're done, just the hair is left. And often you'll see more than one animal leaving its scat in one place. And it's their way of marking their territory and saying that they're there. And you learn to distinguish one kind of scat from another to know what animals are present. You also learn to age the scat to know, like, is this is fairly recent, or whether it's been there for a while, just to know when the animals were around. That, see if I can make it bigger. Also, at the sand dunes near Salmon Creek is a bobcat walking along the edge in a stealth sort of mode. And it would take a while to learn those tracks, but you can. And once you do, you begin to tell a story. That's the scat from the bobcat. Looks different than the coyote. It's hard because they have a shorter intestine and theirs is more felt like. Grosses people out, but we'll pick them up and feel them. We'll break them apart, see what's in them, just to learn more about the animals. And this is a picture that Jay took of a whimbrel, because also, beautiful picture, Jay. Birds, oops, what happened? Oh, gotta go back, sorry. Let me think I can save this. Well, there we go. Let me do this just a little more, okay. So bird tracks are also interesting. Those are the tracks of that whimbrel. And just to give you a sense, Mr. Raven, smartest bird around, check out his tracks. See all the pads? And he has what's called a sharp helix, as you can see. And there are lots of ravens at the beach, and they're fascinating to watch. They're smart, interesting creatures. And what you can do if you want to practice, go to the beach, watch a raven or a seagull land, hop around, do its thing, and then go follow after it. You learn it's a great way to learn an animal's tracks. So great blue heron, we have them all around. It has prehistoric tracks. It looks, they're big. That's a great blue heron track. And oh, finally, that's my daughter, Sophie. We did a backpacking trip on the Lost Coast, another picture of her. And guess who came by our tent while we were asleep? Anyone want to guess?
Is that a bear?
That's a bear. That's a big bear. And I'm not sure Sophie appreciated it when I showed them to her at first, but I was delighted and excited because when do you get to see bear tracks? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to turn things over to Jay, who's going to talk about birding now.
Okay. Do I just start talking? Can you hear me? So I have been walking with George for about 16 years now, as I can imagine, I'd say on about a weekly basis, give or take some. And usually around the area here, a lot of times in Spring Lake or somewhere nearby, once in a while at the beach. We've gone on some excursions. We've been up to Humboldt County. We've been up to out to the Sacramento Valley in the winter. So he asked me to share some of the pictures that I've taken and some of the stories we have as we've kind of worked together to find birds, discover them, identify them, and try to take pictures of them. About the same time he got binoculars, I bought a camera with a pretty big telescope lens. Wasn't very expensive, but I started out with that and I used that for about a year or two. Then I've upgraded a couple of times. So let me share my screen. And okay, hopefully you can see that. And so this is a northern spotted owl, which is the species that, if you remember, Julia Butterfly Hill sat in a redwood tree for over a year to try to protect the species as one of her
2 years.
2 years. And this was in Spring Lake, right by the lagoon, at about 6 o'clock. I think it was about 10 or 11 years ago. And George and I were walking together, and there was a big commotion. There were a bunch of scrub jays and crows making a lot of noise in a specific area. And we walked over there, and we were walking probably at the time, I think, with George's previous dog, Sarah. And all of a sudden on this, about at our level, about at eye level, about 10 feet away was this owl. And I got this and a couple of other pictures of it. So let's see.
And before you go, Jay, go back to the owl. So Jay just described what animal trackers call bird language. Not just that the birds were going crazy, but that we noticed that they were going crazy. And we went to look what was going on. In the book, which is a great book called What the Robin Knows, the first scene has a robin jump from the ground up on a tree. Why does the robin do that? Because a cat is entering the yard. And that's bird language also. So actually it was the crows and the scrub jays that told us that that spotted owl was there. That's bird language. And because of we were attuned to them and actually were listening, we were able to see the spotted owl. We merited, I want to say, seeing the spotted owl.
Yeah, and they definitely clued us in. I mean, we followed. It was a raucous noise, and sometimes you'll hear crows doing that to each other, but in this case, it was a bunch of different species, and this is a pretty rare sighting, I would think, especially in this area. But it's definitely part of their range. So this picture is also from Spring Lake. It's a red-shouldered hawk, and we see a lot of red-shouldered hawks there. And when George and I first started walking around there, this would be like sort of the iconic bird. We'd say, did we see this bird today? We'd see it perched in different places. And this is very, very common bird, probably the most common bird, hawk, at least in Sonoma County. One time, George and I were walking at about 6:30 in the evening, and we looked up in a tree, and there was a bobcat. And then a couple of weeks later, I was walking in the same area during the day when it was sunny out, and I was lucky enough to get this picture of probably the same bobcat. So that was, George, you might want to talk about the tracking and that, but that was one where we just got lucky. I mean, we see a lot of bobcat scat, but you usually don't get a sighting.
So this is the thing we want to tell you. If you develop your own home range, if you go to the same place enough, you will begin to learn who lives there. And so once we learned there was a bobcat in the area, our chances of seeing the bobcat went way up. We still got lucky. But since we've been going to spring lake for over a decade, I mean, we have a pretty good sense of what birds are there and when they come and when they go. I mean, there are people that know much more than we do, but we have our own sense of who our neighbors are. And that's something you gain over time.
Very good. So this picture is of a bird called a merlin, and it is a small type of falcon. And it was taken when George and I took a walk in the Sacramento Valley, the winter before the pandemic started. So probably about last January or a year ago, January. And what's interesting about this picture is George and I both saw this bird. He saw it through his binoculars. I took this photograph, and it wasn't until I got home and actually zoomed in that we realized that actually another Ellis is. So this is kind of a good example of how sometimes photography complements the trekking. Not only that, the trekking complements the photography. So I thought that was interesting, and it's a beautiful bird. This third type of falcon, small falcon, called an American Kestrel. And this is I took this on a walk I took with George a couple of weeks ago at Sonoma Regional Park in Glen Ellen. And what's interesting about this is that we saw this bird fly into an oak tree. I saw a flash of it, and George got a pretty good look at it. And I said, that's a kestrel, because intuitively I saw kind of a flash of orange. And George wasn't quite sure. So he got his binoculars out, and he got a pretty good look at the bird for quite a long time. I'd say we were sitting on a bench, and for about 10 minutes, he had his binoculars on this bird. Other people walked by and saw it, and I couldn't see it for some reason, maybe where I was sitting. But after a few minutes, I got up and I walked over with my camera, and I saw it on the branch, but it was in the shadow. And I picked up my camera and I took a picture, and the bird came out into the sunlight, and I got this picture. So it was a kestrel.
Jay, this is Erwin. Just a question for you. A couple of pictures earlier, the bird up on the hawk, your sound got a little garbled. So we actually didn't know what we were looking for in its claws. Could you tell us again and show us that picture?
Yeah, so I don't know what kind of bird it is, but it's just some bird that, so this merlin preys on other birds, and it had caught a bird in its claws, and we didn't know it until actually I got home and looked at this picture and zoomed in. So, but I don't know what kind of bird it is. It's some kind of small bird. Erwin, that answer your question?
Yes, yeah, we just couldn't hear your narration on that, so thank you.
Yep. So these are young Cooper's hawks, and this picture was taken I don't know, about 12 years ago in Spring Lake also on a walk with George. And this picture actually won an award for this photography show a couple of years ago with the Laguna de Santa Rosa. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about show some pictures I took over the last year in my backyard. Since, we were all in a pandemic and we were all locked down, I could talk a little bit about what I do in my garden to try to attract birds, grow a lot of salvia if you want hummingbirds like this Anna's hummingbird, grow sunflowers. I find that it's a lot better to plant and grow sunflowers than to buy a bunch of sunflower seeds in bags and put them into feeders. It's a little bit more work, maybe. You need the garden space, but you get some great pictures, and the birds have a lot more fun getting the seeds out. And the flowers look great. This is right outside of a box in my garden for bluebirds. So this is the first time this spring in maybe 4 or 5 years that we've had a nest, but it's been pretty active, and that's the male bluebird, I think, bringing in some nest materials. This is a quail, California quail. If you just leave a little space for like bare dirt or sand, quail will come to your garden because they love to take baths in dirt. So usually I'll try to do that. Also having some bushes that are high enough, the males will sit on top and kind of act as guards. I think it was, George talked a little bit about, more obviously connecting this to Judaism. For me, it was a picture I took that sort of piqued my interest in getting into bird photography. It was the intricacy of how the feathers create these patterns. I mean, I'd seen quail, my whole life, but I never got close enough to actually see how much detail there was. They're just amazing. And it, obviously all the colors change with the lighting and all that. So anyway, this is an Allen's hummingbird. So planting different types of flowers will bring different types of species. So this is called a Mexican sunflower, I think. But one of the things I did was plant a bunch of different pollinating type of plants to try to attract things like hummingbirds and other pollinators in my garden. This is a Redtail Hawk, which I got, right out in my backyard. They were nesting nearby, and I would see them almost every day. But it took me a while to get this picture in flight. So what I'll talk about now is one of the things we talked about is we share some resources. George shared some information about a couple of books. What I thought I'd share is a couple of places in Sonoma County where you could go to see some interesting birds really close up, where you don't really have to depend on luck to see them, and where you don't really even have to take much of a hike. So one right now, especially in the spring, is on West 9th Street in Santa Rosa. Some of you might have visited this before. On West 9th Street in a residential area between North Dutton and Stony Point Road, there are a few eucalyptus trees where hundreds of egrets and herons come to nest every spring. And it's incredible if you haven't seen it. And for me, it's just an amazing place to get photographs because they're constantly coming in and out, feeding their young, building the nests. And, you just have an opportunity to get some amazing pictures like this angelic images of this. This is a great egret. But there are 4 or 5 different species all nesting at the same time, fighting for space. And it's pretty incredible to see. So that's happening right now, usually, for a couple of months starting in March or April. And it's been going on for years. Another place, as you're probably aware, is Bodega Harbor. So This is a flock of marbled godwits, and there are thousands of them. And they're amazingly beautiful birds, both individually to see up close and as flocks as they fly over the harbor. And they're almost always there. They actually breed in the prairies, like up in Wisconsin and Alberta, but not all of them breed every year. So I think there's some poppies in Bodega, and you literally can park right on the side of the road and just walk along the harbor there, and get close up with birds like this. Another place that's interesting is in Petaluma, the Ellis Creek Water Treatment Center, which is right adjoining Schollenberger Park, but seems to be just a better place for catching good glimpses of birds. You could park right there and literally walk right from the parking lot to these pools where you see some really interesting wading birds for the most part. This one is a black-necked stilt, and I've seen them there quite often, but I've also seen some rare birds like glossy ibises and American bitterns, birds like that. So those are all the pictures I have to share right now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jay. Go ahead. Was there more you wanted to say?
No, that's it.
I want to see if I can get in the chat some resources for you all. Let me see if I can make this happen. Hold on one second. I'd like to, if I'm getting lucky. Let's see. Let's see if it'll allow me to do it. I did. Okay, so that should work. Here's some resources for you all. Jim Sullivan does still teaches tracking. The books are there. They got jumbled a little bit in the chat, but you can see them. There's a couple tracking books: Mammal Tracks and Sign, a guide. That's by Mark Olbrook here, and then Tracker's Field Guide, Animal Tracking by James Lowry. What the Robin Knows. I think if you just want one book that will inspire you to do birding and animal tracking, get What the Robin Knows by John Young. Such a great book. Jim Sullivan's phone number, and I just put Magic of the Ordinary also in there. So, do we have time for a little question and answer, or?
We only have a couple of minutes. So yes, a little question and answer.
Okay.
I have a comment. I'm a hiker, and I love the presentation, so I'll start looking at animal tracks.
And
I just wanted to ask what time of day you usually go.
Well, we go when we can, but of course the morning and the evening, afternoons are often better, but just go. Just go. And what you'll learn is there's different animals at different times, different birds at different times, but with eyes open for wonder, you'll find and see things. That's the beauty of it. And patience helps. Can we grab a couple more questions? Or
Chaya and then Neshama.
Okay.
I was wondering if you ever gave the birds or the animals names when you saw them, especially if they were like recurring creatures like that bobcat.
That's a great question. We definitely get to know some animals, but we don't name them. But we get to know them and kind of their behavior. If we're lucky, if we merit that, that's happened sometimes. Great question.
They probably have their own names that they can't tell you very easily.
Indeed. One more, I think, Diana, and then we'll have to stop.
This is totally inspiring. Thank you to both of you. I just wanted to share that I've been watching for the last 2 months the webcam on the peregrine falcon nest at the top of the Campanile at UC Berkeley, and I'll put the link in the chat. It's a 24-hour webcam. It's amazing.
And you can, by the way, you can go to Kehoe Beach in Point Reyes, and there are peregrine falcons there all the time, nesting in the cliffs. It's
Yeah.
completely worth going to check them out. You have to hike a little bit, not too hard, spectacularly beautiful. I want to thank everyone. It's been a pleasure. I hope we've been able to, it feels like prayer to me. So I hope it's been prayer for you. Thank you so much, Jay.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Rabbi George. Thank you, Jay. This was really exciting. And from the chat, it looks like there are people that would come with if you ever offered a group walk.
There we go. Nice idea. Jay will lead it.
There are also people offering their apartments as base camp if you come to Humboldt.
Cool. Good to know. Thank you so much. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.